seeing, normally, we see, I think it's the East Gate or something that we see. That's the picture we have. They rebuilt the whole thing. It had been 100 years or more since, it had been 100 years, I guess, since the Jews first went back to Jerusalem. And at Nehemiah's time, Jerusalem as a city was in exactly the same state as it was in 586 when the Babylonians totally destroyed it. And we'll look at that. I don't know if we'll get to it tonight, but we'll look at that particular verse. So this is kind of the setting. Nehemiah returned back to the king's service in 432. So it's a long list. I don't expect you to remember all the dates. But I just want you to think about, okay, this is 150 years or so. And it took 100 years for the Jews to begin rebuilding their city. 100 years. Okay, I'm going to move on. I'm very tempted to run off the rails here. I'm going to try not to do that. So let me read to you 2 Chronicles 36, 15 through 21, which is right at the very end of 2 Chronicles. The Lord, the God of their fathers, sent word to them again and again by his messengers, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. But they continually mocked the messengers of God, meaning the prophets, despised his words, and scoffed at his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord arose against his people, until there was no remedy. In other words, God waited as long as he could wait, until there was nothing else he could do except bring judgment on Judah. Therefore he brought against them the Chaldeans, who slew their young men with the sword in the house of their sanctuary, and had no compassion on young men or virgin, old man or infirm. He gave them all into his hand. Now, I want you to really kind of picture this. This is very ISIS-like. This is not Geneva Convention warfare. This is not where you protect civilians. It's not where you protect women and children. You come in and you slaughter everybody. That's what this picture is. Or in the case of ISIS, maybe some of you remember where they lined those Egyptians up on the beach and beheaded them on public TV. Okay? This is the mentality. This is the mentality. Okay. Then verse 19, then they burned the house of God and broke down the wall of Jerusalem and burned all its fortified buildings with fire and destroyed all its valuable articles. Those who had escaped from the sword he carried away to Babylon, and they were servants to him and to his sons until the rule of the kingdom of Persia, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed its Sabbaths, all the days of its desolation, and kept its Sabbath until 70 years were complete. But I mentioned before that the 70 years didn't start with Daniel. The 70 years started with the destruction of the temple in 586. And when the temple was reconstructed in 516, completed in 516, bingo, 70 years. So God was real serious about what he was saying. And his measurement was the temple. His measurement was the temple. And this is something that's important for us to realize. God's measurement system is not ours. God's view of time, God's view of history, is not ours. God's view of Ukraine, Russia, the United States, all that, it isn't our view. It isn't our view. God's got a different thing going on. Now, it would be helpful if he would give us the mind of Christ when we pray. And he will if we listen. It's hard for us to break out, though, of seeing things from our level. But we need to. I think all of you have flown in a plane. Or at least most of you have flown in a plane. The view from a plane is way different than the view on the ground. Right? Everybody agree with that? I mean, it's way different. You don't even look at the stuff on the ground. I mean, you may look for your house or something if you're up flying at 35,000 feet. But it's just different. It's different. And I'm not saying God doesn't see the detail. He sees every bit of the detail. I'm just saying his view, his perspective, his purpose is different than ours. And as we learn to pray and seek him, we've got to figure that out and let him give us his view of what's going on. We've talked about that before, but then again in Daniel with principalities and powers and demonic beings seeking to rule the world. It's not just kings. It's powers behind the kings, and the kings don't do anything. Okay. So God's promise in 70 years was kept. Rebuilding was not easy. When they left Judah in captivity, they at least had a nation. It wasn't a holy nation. They had a nation. The Jews ran it all. When they went back, they didn't run anything. They didn't run anything. They didn't own the grocery stores. They weren't the governors. They didn't run anything. Their enemies ran it. The mentality of the culture was totally different. And we talk about having a Judeo-Christian foundation in the United States. Make no mistake, that foundation can be destroyed. And is being destroyed. It probably has been destroyed. The younger generation. It's gone. I mean, when you rebuild it on something that's not that, it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder. We see that struggle with Israel. Okay. So, the land was not homogeneous from a people group standpoint. It was not homogeneous from a religious standpoint. It wasn't homogeneous from a religious standpoint, meaning who we pulling for. It wasn't like living in Dallas where everybody's from the Dallas Cowboys. It wasn't like that. Just wasn't like that. It certainly was not homogeneous from a political standpoint or from any standpoint you compare to the God. I'm sure even the foods were different when the Jews left because the folks that came in brought their own stuff, right? I've shared this example with them a number of times. But when we left Anderson in 1999, Anderson was a fairly homogeneous place. When we came back, it's not. The place where we knew there used to be a 7-Eleven was now, the sign was all in Spanish. It's a meat market or something like that. When a new culture comes in, they bring their stuff with them. They bring their stuff with them. We moved to Texas and went into the Walmart grocery the first time. In the produce section, we didn't recognize what was in there. I mean, there were prickly pear cactus leaves in the fruit. You think I'm kidding? Now, I don't know how you eat one. I'm not going to fry. It'd be like tending a porcupine. I guess you can do it, but why? There were these fruits that I couldn't pronounce the name and didn't know what they were. And some of them looked soft and pleasant. And some of them looked like, why would anybody eat that? You know? And then you walk down the aisles where you think there'd be bread. No. I mean, they had bread. But they had big packages of corn and flour tortillas. And I'm not kidding. Like this big. Enormous. Because the culture was stiff. This is what the Jews came back to. Everything they knew had been destroyed. Well, I guess I'll leave it at that. I'll read the first verses from Nehemiah next week. But I want you to have this picture, and I'll send these notes out so that you've got it. I want you to